Welcome to this video edition of Shop Talk. I'm Jason Glashinsky, co-founder and CEO of Silvertree. We are a private wealth management firm serving business owners, executives, and workers in the manufacturing space. Our mission is to make a measurable dent in the labor shortage the manufacturing space is experiencing by changing the perception of the skilled trades and unlocking often hidden opportunities so you can reinvest back into your business, yourself, and your family. Today, I'm going to be joined by Bob Berg, author of The Go-Giver, Wall Street Journal bestseller, Business Week bestseller. He sold over 1 million copies, consistently been on the top 25 of Porchlight Business Booksellers list. He's been translated into 30 different languages and has been rated number 10 in Inc. magazine's most motivational books ever. Today, Bob's going to show with you how a subtle shift in focus is not only a more uplifting and fulfilling way of conducting business, but it's also the most financially profitable way as well. For 30 years, he's helped companies, sales leaders, and their teams more effectively communicate their value. Bob is an advocate and supporter and a defender of the free enterprise system, believing that the amount of money one makes is directly proportional to how many people that they serve. Today, we're going to discuss with Bob the following: 5 laws that will bring you both personal effectiveness and professional success, the difference between price and value and why that's so vitally important to understand, how one golden nugget of advice from a drive-by mentor totally shifted Bob's perspective and played a big role in his success, and then one thing to absolutely avoid doing when asking or seeking out a mentor, and why being a go-giver is absolutely congruent with and even honors human nature. And with that, I'd like to introduce Bob Berg. Bob, how are you today?
Doing great, Jason. Thanks for having me with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this has just been a super exciting experience for me. I just recently finished reading your book, The Go-Giver. I actually ordered it on my wife's account, and we had some challenges with getting the book shipped, and you reached out to her personally on Facebook to discuss that, and we got connected that way. So just a fantastic opportunity here for us to really hear from the man himself who put this book together.
Thank you.
Yeah,
well, I'll tell you what. I had a great co-author, John David Mann, and he was really the what I call the lead writer storyteller, because it's a business parable. And so I was honored just to get to work. Well, I'm much more of a how-to guy. I'm step 1, step 2, step 3. So I consider myself the boring one of the team. But John's a great writer, fortunately.
So maybe let's just start with that. Start with the premise of the book. You know, really, what is The Go-Giver about?
Yeah, well, I mean, you nicely alluded to it earlier. It's understanding that shifting your focus, and I think it begins there, from getting to giving. Now, here's the thing. When we say giving, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, understanding that doing so is not only a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it is the most financially profitable. But, you know, Jason, not for any kind of woo-woo, way out there, magical, mystical type of reasons. It's simply this, and I think this makes very logical sense, and that is when you can take your focus off of yourself and place it on serving others, discovering their needs, their wants, their desires. People feel good about you. Really, they feel great about you. They want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They're much more likely to want to do business with you and to tell the world about you. In other words, being your personal walking ambassador.
Absolutely. You know, and that ties in. I know you've written a few other books that I am absolutely going to be adding to my library. But, you know, you talk about this within The Go-Giver and these 5 laws. If you would maybe just kind of break them down, and we don't have to go super in depth because, of course, we're going to encourage folks to pick up a copy of your book. But, you know, just maybe go through quickly the 5 laws and how those apply to this conversation.
Yeah, so the 5 laws themselves are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. The law of value is all about providing such a wonderful experience over and above the intrinsic value of your job title or the service you provide. It's that customer or client feeling so fantastic about the entire experience that when it comes down to it at the end, they have received much more in value than what they've paid, while you, of course, also make a very healthy profit. In any free market based exchange, free market simply meaning no one's forced to do business with anyone else, there should always be at least two profits: the buyer profits and the seller profits, because each of them comes away better off afterwards than they were beforehand. The law of compensation says your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So while law number one represents your potential income, law number two represents your actual income, because it's how many lives you impact with that exceptional value. So we could say exceptional value plus significant reach equals very high compensation. Law number three, the law of influence, says your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. No, not in a way that you're a doormat or a martyr or self-sacrificial in any way. Absolutely not at all. It's simply, as Joe, the protege, learned from several of the mentors, the golden rule of business, of sales, what have you, is simply that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And there's no faster, more powerful, or more effective way to elicit those feelings toward you from others than by genuinely moving from that I focus or me focus to an other focus, looking to, as Sam, one of the mentors in the story, advised Joe, make your win all about the other person's win.
So I got to jump in here, though, because what for me was really interesting about how the book was all laid out was this really law number 5, because I had the question the entire time I was reading the book of, wait a minute, but how does this work? Because I can't just constantly be give all the time, right? Because you could literally just give yourself away. Or how do you make your business profitable if you're constantly giving and giving? And that's where the fifth law comes in, which I thought really just that was really what hit home for me. If you wouldn't mind just expanding on that.
Yeah, well, the law of receptivity, the law number 5, says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. And really, it means nothing more than this. And you might remember Pindar taking Joe through this exercise. You breathe out, you also have to breathe in. It's not one or the other, it's both. You breathe out carbon dioxide, you breathe in oxygen. You breathe out, which is giving, you breathe in, which is receiving. Giving and receiving are simply two sides of the very same coin. They work in tandem. Now, the world around us gives us very negative messages about money, right? Very negative anti-prosperity messages. And unfortunately, that can get into people's heads, the conscious and most insidiously the unconscious, and people can sort of sabotage and keep money from flowing to them. But really, when you apply those first 4 laws, okay, you're creating that benevolent context for your success. And you just need to be able to receive with gratitude. But remember, when we talk about the value that we're giving, and I often, and I used to say this when I spoke at sales conferences all the time. I don't really travel anymore. I'm 66 years old, too old to be getting on a plane all the time. But I'd be in front of thousands of salespeople, and the first thing I would say to them, Jason, is nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet, right? They're not going to buy from you because you need the money, and they're not even going to buy from you just because you're a really nice person. They're going to buy from you because they believe they'll be better off by doing so than by not doing so. So when you're giving value, remember, you're not giving yourself away, you're giving value. When you're giving value to others on an ongoing, constant, consistent basis, this is when people are going to feel good about you. They're going to know, like, and trust you. They're going to want to do business with you. And you've just got to be able to allow yourself to receive.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, and also a really great segue into the next question I wanted to ask you, which is around this idea of value. Anybody who has spent any amount of time on the internet has seen these sales funnels or seen these ads where it's like you get this, and it's valued at $10,000, but for today only you can get it for $900. But it's a $10,000 value. I mean,
and a Ginsu knife, right?
Right. I mean, but I think we're really talking about something else. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about taking something and discounting it, or even some of these companies who have never sold this product for $10,000, but have just slapped an arbitrary value on it to give it a sales type feel. Maybe expand a little bit more on what is this when you talk value? What do you really mean by that?
Okay, so let's do it this way. Price is a dollar figure, right? It's finite. It is what it is. Value is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, what have you, that brings so much worth to another person that they will willingly exchange in this case, their money for it, and be glad they did, while you make a very healthy profit. So let's just take an example outside of your business, although someone who you probably network with, let's say an accountant. And someone hires an accountant to do their taxes, okay? And this accountant charges a fee, and we're just going to name a round figure and say it's $1,000. That's her price, or her fee, or her price, $1,000. That's the price. What's the value she provides? Now, even on a very basic level, okay, she is able to save that person $5,000 in taxes. She saves that person countless hours of time, and she provides that family with the security and peace of mind of knowing that it was done correctly. Okay, this is something that customer, that client, values very much, right? So there's a big difference between price and value. But here's what's most important to recognize: that again, because value is relative, value is always in the eyes of the beholder. It's not what you or I find to be of value. It's not what you or I think our customers should find of value. It's what they find of value. That's why in any kind of sales process, the discovery is the most important aspect. Because we all come at the world from different sets of beliefs based on upbringing, environment, schooling, everything, right? But we all see the world in our own way. What we value isn't necessarily what our prospective customer or client values, which is why our entire job is to discover what that person needs, wants, or desires. What do they find valuable? And then the idea is to help them get that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even in my own business, when I was first brought into the industry in 2004, I was trained on what they called the 2-call close, right? It was, you have 2 meetings. In the first meeting, you figure out how you're going to do the close. And then the second meeting, it's you close the deal. Today, our process is much lengthier on the front end, because we don't just move into a close. We're actually building a relationship, and we're doing this deep discovery to find out exactly not only what their problems are, but what makes them tick, what things are important, all of that stuff. So I 100%, real world experience myself personally, completely wholeheartedly agree with you. And it's interesting that our paths have crossed at this juncture in my life, because part of the reason that I've ended up having my business structured this way is through mentorship and coaching. And so I wanted to shift gears a little bit towards that. When we're looking at, people are, I often tell people, they say, well, how did you get to this point? And it's like, I went and got a coach. Michael Jordan had a coach. Brett, I'm a big Packer fan. I've got, Packer memorabilia all over the wall, and they all have had great coaches. Vince Lombardi, arguably one of the best. So I went out and got coaches, but I'd love to just hear some advice from you, and maybe even talk a little bit about this drive-by mentor that you had, as far as things that people should be thinking about when choosing who they're going to use, either as a coach or a mentor.
Yeah, well, I think as a coach, because there's overlap there, but I think a mentor is more the 30,000-foot view, and they tend to be a guide, where a coach is more hands-on. How to helping you understand yourself, taking you through a process. Both have their place. I believe in both. I utilize both.
Okay.
Yeah. So, as far as finding a coach, I think it's someone who has been at least relatively successful in your industry or profession, who can also teach. Now, by the way, why didn't I say someone who's an absolute standout, amazing top producer in your? Sometimes those don't make the best coaches.
Right.
A lot of times they don't. The best. Vince Lombardi was a good football player, but he wasn't great. He wasn't a star. A lot of times when someone has just this talent, this natural talent, they can't possibly have the empathy for those who don't already know what it is they need to do.
Right.
You know, Vince Lombardi was fantastic when it came to the fundamentals. I mean, he was all fun. You know, what was his famous thing? You know, when he'd start every preseason with, "Gentlemen, this is a
This is
football, right?"
football. Yep.
Right. I mean, he was very, people like John Wooden. And again, John Wooden was one of the greatest coaches of all time. He was a good ball player, but he wasn't a superstar. He was another guy who, you know, when he first taught, it was how to put your socks on correctly so that you didn't get blisters. I mean, what I'm saying is, the person who you have coach you doesn't have to be a Hall of Fame producer, but they need to be good, of course, and they need to know their stuff. But what you want to make sure is they know how to teach and know how to coach, right?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah. So move towards, if you would, this idea of a mentor versus a coach,
Yeah.
right? Because I think there's a great distinction there.
Yeah. So this is going to be pretty much a guide, and it doesn't even have to be somebody in your business or industry. It could be just someone who you admire, respect in a certain way, and they're dealing basically on success principles, right? And what happens is, a lot of times people will try to find a mentor and they will, approach them in a way that, especially younger people do this, but anybody might, but they'll approach and say, "I need help. Would you be my mentor?" Well, a mentor protege relationship is a relationship, right? It's not something that, you wouldn't just, like they say, ask somebody to marry you before you first ask them out on a date. And so I would discourage someone to just, approach someone, if assuming you don't already have a great relationship with, you don't have a relationship with them, but you can still approach them. But instead of just saying, "Would you be my mentor?" Because everybody asks them to be their mentor and they only have a limited amount of time, and just saying, "Would you be my mentor?" doesn't distinguish you. But you could approach pretty much anyone and say, "I know you're very busy. So if this is something you either don't have time to do or for whatever reason would rather not, I'll absolutely understand. I'm wondering if I might ask you one or two very specific questions." Now, when you frame it that way, what you've done is, first, you've distinguished yourself from pretty much everyone else. Okay. You also, very importantly, gave this person an out or a back door. You let them know that if this is not something they were interested in doing, you absolutely would understand. I call this the law of the out or back door. It simply says the bigger the out or back door you give someone to take, the less they'll feel the need to take it. Okay. And then what you did thirdly is, rather than just asking, "Can I pick your brain?" which is so general and makes that person maybe feel this person doesn't really know what they want, you've asked, "May I ask you a couple or, one or two very specific questions?" This says to this would-be mentor, "Okay, this person knows what they want to ask. They're not going to take up a lot of my time. They have an agenda, agenda in a good way." Okay, so now, and they'll usually, not always, not everyone, but usually the person will say, "Sure, go ahead. How can I help you?" So you ask a couple of the questions. You don't take up a lot of their time. You've researched them beforehand, so you don't ask anything that could have been discovered online. You let them know how much you appreciate them, and how much you will put their info, after the conversation, how much you'll put their information to work. Would it be all right if I kept in touch from time to time just to update you on how things are? And they'll say, "Yeah, of course, please do." Now, what I would do immediately after that conversation is I would write a handwritten, personalized note of thanks, just a short one. "Dear Miss so-and-" established. Thank you so much for taking valuable time out of your day. Your wisdom is priceless, and I look forward to applying it right away. As mentioned, I'll keep in touch and let you know how things progress. Best regards, so and so. Send it in a envelope, hand stamp it, send that off. That's going to make a big impression on that person. Now, the next thing I would do is I would make a small, doesn't have to be anything big, but I'd make a small donation to that person's favorite charity or cause, which you can either easily find out by looking online or asking their admin or online. Make a small donation in their name. It'll get back to them. and you're not doing it to kiss up or anything, but basically you're just communicating that yes, I value you and your time and want to at least be able to do something I know that you would find to be of value, right? Now, again, those two things right there, what a difference maker. Now, you might call again in a few weeks or email or whatever, touch base again, let them know. You might have another conversation. That, by the way, might be your only conversation you ever have with that person, and you'll talk to different people until you find that Tuesday with Maury's type of mentor that you have an ongoing relationship with. But so what I would do is I would utilize those steps in finding a mentor and do so without attachment to the results. If they're supposed to be that one mentor, great. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but utilize that process and you're going to connect with people who are able to really help you in your career progress.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic example that you gave of just, making a small monetary donation to the charity that's near and dear to them, because it could even be a $50 donation, but it might, for them it's 50, it could be $50,000 worth of value because you took the time to recognize what was important to them. That's the difference, I think, there.
That is absolutely the difference.
So are there other ways that you can think of that, that was one of the questions I was going to ask, but we just kind of just rode right into it. But are there other ways that maybe a protege can bring value to their mentor? Because, obviously it's the protege typically looking up, but there's got to be other ways that they can do it.
Yeah, well, first by being a good student, by being a good protege, by listening and applying, but also by, there's ways you might be able to help that person. For example, mentors tend to be a little bit older, usually not always, and they may not be as adept with technology, and you might be, and maybe you see something on their website that you could go in and help them fix up. Right. Or maybe they're a collector of books on old, ancient, Roman war heroes. And so you find a collector's edition and or maybe you're able to connect them with somebody who might be a good connection for someone who they know or, there are so many ways to be able to provide value. But the big thing is just the fact that you're making the effort to do so is huge in that person's mind.
Absolutely.
Many people are takers and they're seeing that that's not you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Which kind of all, again, just ties in, with the philosophies that are in the book. And that's why I think this whole idea that's in here, and I think it's a little story about a powerful business idea. It is so powerful. And I think so often people in sales are trying to go get, not realizing that if you give and are open to receiving, that's really what can open the floodgates to massive success, but not just for you, but also for the people that you're connected to.
Absolutely, sure.
And it's just paying attention. So I think that. Yep,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. So, maybe comment, if you would, we alluded to it earlier, but just how this idea of the go-giver philosophy really ties in, with human nature and really hones in on that. If you would maybe just explain on that a little bit further.
Well, I think there's two aspects. One is that, it's understanding that to the degree you provide value to others, that's the degree they value you. Now, someone might say, well, but should it be that way? I don't know. It just is. Right. So, I think what was a Byron Katie who said, you can, when you argue with reality, you'll lose, but only 100% of the time. So, so that's how but there's also another element of human nature that I think is one reason why the message of the Go-Giver has been well received. And that is we have a need to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And we have a need to add value to life, add value to others, to make a contribution. Now, for most of us as entrepreneurs, salespeople, business owners, we do that mainly through our business. That doesn't mean we don't have other things that we do and other causes, but we mainly make this difference through our businesses. So when you operate the go-giver way, it really allows you to bring your best self to the game, every single day.
Yeah, and I again, it's still very fresh here for me, but I absolutely I almost felt a little bit like the main character in the book, whereas things have been happening in my life that I didn't even realize were as a result of taking this type of positioning. And really, I think this book has just kind of help bring that into the forefront.
We love knowing that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's just what makes this so powerful. So, but if you would, I think that, I think there might be some misconceptions about this idea of the go-giver, and the name itself implies like you just give, and we've kind of alluded to it before. But if you're giving constantly, we talked about this idea of being open to receiving. But maybe if you could just elaborate a little bit more on kind of how that two-way flow starts to happen as you apply these five principles, or five laws, if you will, that are part of the go-giver way, as you put it.
Yeah, well, when you're focusing on giving value to others, and you touch the lives of many with that value, and when you're placing their interests first, again, not in a self-sacrificial way, but knowing that that's how they are going to buy from you for their reasons. When you come at things congruently from your authentic core, which, and when I define authenticity, that doesn't mean there's no boundaries and you say or do whatever you want because that's authentic. When I talk about authenticity, we're talking about really just acting congruently with your values. And when you open yourself to receive, you've created that flow. You've created that breathing out and breathing in. And as you do that, as you're able to receive, you're actually then able to give even more, which allows you to keep that same flow going, which means you can receive more, give more, receive more. And really, that's how it works. And, when you think about it, and again, talk about, whether we're talking about human nature, economic nature, physical nature, you think about it, you plant before you harvest, right? You sow before you reap. Well, you give value before you receive value. It's like Pindar said to Joe at the beginning of the story. Some people go up to a fireplace with the attitude of, first give me some heat and some fire, then I'll add on some logs, and some newspaper and light a match. Well, life doesn't work that way. Imagine opening up a new account at a bank and saying, hey, I'm thinking of opening up an account, but first I need you to give me an interest payment. It doesn't work that way. So we tie into human nature, we tie into physical nature, economic nature. We live in truths, and you look to make the world as good a place as you can by bringing your best value to it, and allow yourself to be open to receive.
Very, very well said. Very well said. I have two final questions as we draw to a close here. And the first one would be, how would you see the go-giver applying specifically to someone who maybe is not in a sales position? Because I think we often think of this concept and we're talking about sales. But what about somebody who's in, say, a leadership position, for example?
Well, in a leadership position, it's exactly the same, but your clients are those you're leading, or your customers and clients. So we would say, a go-giver leader is that person who has the best interests of their team at heart. In fact, in Jim Collins's book, Good to Great, he talked about the difference between level 4 leaders and level 5 leaders. And level 4 and 5 leaders both were as talented as one another. The difference was that level 4 leaders made it about themselves. They wanted the glory, they took the credit and gave away the blame. And they did an okay job, but the succession was never good, right? Because they had a lousy culture that couldn't sustain a change, losing them as the key figure. The level 5 leaders that Collins talked about, well, they were humble. They cared about the company. They cared about those they were leading. They created that environment where people could thrive, where people could step into their best selves. It wasn't about them. It was about those they were leading.
Yep.
And that's how a go-giver leader does it. And the same principles, just a different situation.
Fantastic. Well, as we wrap up here, any final comments? It's my last question, and I'm literally just tossing you a softball here, Bob, so you can do whatever you want with it. But it's, any final comments or things that you'd like to mention that we didn't already cover here about the go-giver, or anything else that's going on in your world, or that you'd love to share with our audience today?
No, I mean, I think it's just a a drive-by mentor once said to me, and I say drive-by because I didn't even really know the person other than one real conversation with them. But I was struggling, a salesperson in a slump at the time, and he could tell my focus was on myself, not on my customers. And he said, Berg, if you want to make a lot of money in sales, he said, don't have making money as your target. Your target is serving others. Then he added, now, when you hit the target, you'll get a reward, and that reward will come in the form of money, and you can do with that money whatever you choose. But never forget, he said, the money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It's not the target itself. Your target is serving others. And I think that when we approach sales and business from that foundational premise, we really put ourselves 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game.
Absolutely. Love it, Bob. Great stuff. Very well said. Very well spoken. Appreciate you spending time with me today. Folks, if you haven't picked up on the idea already, go get yourself a copy of The Go-Giver. Fantastic reading. Thanks again to Bob. Thanks to all of our listeners. Go out and make yourselves a fantastic day. Take care of those clients. Take care of those that you serve. Take care, everyone.